In this lesson, we take a look at the self-illumination and advanced options in Coronamaterial. I'm going to open up the Node Material Editor, create a new Coronamaterial and assign it to the shader ball. Enable self-illumination and go to the self-illumination tab and run interactive rendering. We talked about self-illumination when we discussed Corona light material in the lighting section of the course. And as we discussed in that lesson, here you can turn your material into a self-illuminating material. If the multiplier value is set to 0, we get only the diffuse contribution. Let's increase the multiplier to 1. Now the geometry is self-illuminating. We discussed how this feature of the Corona material differs from using a Corona light material and an actual light source. I refer you back to the Corona light material lesson in the lighting section of the course, but here they have included this small note: do not use this feature as the main light source in the scene and use an actual Corona light material or Corona light. You can increase the multiplier to get a brighter self-illuminating object. Or use any color or texture that you want. Let's change the color back to white and multiplier back to 0. And disable self-illumination altogether. Now we can start discussing the advanced tab of the Corona material. For that, first let's set the diffuse level to 0, reflection level to 100, reflection glossiness to 0.8, Fresnel IOR to 999, and increase anisotropy amount to 0.8. Now we have this anisotropic highlights. In the anisotropy orientation section of the advanced tab, you can determine the base direction of the anisotropic highlights either based on local axis or UVW coordinates. When it's set to local axis, the anisotropic highlights rotate around the object local Z axis. If I select the shader ball and rotate it, you notice the anisotropic highlights direction sticks with the object's orientation. But when set to UVW, the rotation will be based on U or V coordinates, and if we rotate the shader ball, the highlights direction won't follow the geometry's local orientation. This feature has some bugs in the Corona material and in Corona 4 Cinema 4D at the time being. Maybe it gets fixed in a future release. For now, let's create a new Corona material and assign it to the shader ball. We have this per material visibility section, which can be very useful. You can disable visible directly, which hides the material from direct camera rays. You can hide the material to be seen in the reflections and refractions of other objects and materials. You can hide the material from the GI rays. And we take a look at these visible in masks option in a moment. We'll be taking a closer look at these visibility options when discussing Corona compositing tag later on in the course. We have this alpha mode, which controls how the object with this material applied to will show up in the alpha channel or alpha pass. When set to default, the value or color of this material in the alpha channel will be based on opacity and refraction components. The more transparent, the darker the representation will be in the alpha channel. If I set it to always black, the material will be shown as completely transparent in the alpha channel. Therefore, black pixels in the alpha channel, obviously. and if set to always white, the material will be considered completely opaque in the alpha and represented by white pixels. This can be helpful, for example, when you have a transparent material but you want it to be considered opaque in the alpha. So you would set it to always white. We can set it to default for now. Using this material ID option, you can assign a material ID to this material. I can set it to, let's say, any random number like 29. Then go to Corona Multipass window and add a mask pass. Enable material ID and set it to 29. If we start the render, now we have a mask pass with a mask of the objects that have that material with the material ID of 29 applied to. Let's get back to that visible in masks option up here. Because this option is enabled, we can see this material in different masking render passes like the mask pass that we have currently. But if I disable this option, it won't be rendered in any masking render elements. And finally, we have this PBR mode. For this, let me set the diffuse level to 0, reflection level to 100%, and reflection glossiness 2.3. Notice the edges of the object, how the overall color of the object remains consistent. But if I disable the PBR mode or physically based render mode, we start to see this whitening of the edges, which is unrealistic, and this is how Corona behaved in older version, and this option should always be on. And the only reason this option is here so it can provide backward compatibility with older scenes done using older versions of Corona. So in this lesson we learned about self-illumination and advanced tab of the Corona material. And by that we are done with the Corona material itself, and now we can start to learn how to create some frequently used materials like wood, concrete, plastic, metals, and so on in Corona using Corona material before moving on to other Corona materials. See you in the next lesson.